All right. All right. This is the part now where I switch to English, since my French, like most of you probably notice, is not that great. All right, let's get started. Well, welcome everyone. I see some names, some people, some of my students that already know me, which is great. Hello to all of you. For the ones who don't know me, my name is Nuno, and I'm the program director for the MSc in Hotel and Tourism. And PSV invited me this week to do this talk about the impact of COVID-19 in tourism. Well, there's many approaches I was thinking about taking this. And to understand that, I decided to divide my presentation into two major parts. Okay, what is the impact that we know so far in terms of decreasing numbers? Okay, and the other thing is what can we expect kind of in the future? How long it will take for things to go back to normal? Obviously, a lot of that will be speculation, and it will be my opinion. So always take it with a pinch of salt. All right. So the first big question that I wanted to tackle is, all right, so when it comes to tourism, how bad is it right now? How bad is the tourism going down because of this pandemic that the world is suffering? Well, just a couple of data just to let you know. According to the World Tourism Organization, all right, 100% of tourism destinations right now have travel restrictions, and that's just to let you know. It's around 217 countries that right now have a travel restriction, and different degrees of travel restriction, obviously. But out of these 217, around 72% now. This is changing a little bit every week, but you can. Around 156 of these countries have completely closed their borders, and only on very specific situations are allowing people to enter the country. All right. And as of today, no country has lifted travel restrictions. So as of today, every single country that is a tourism destination in the world has some level of travel restrictions. But like I mentioned, some of them a little bit more strict than others. And just to understand all this, one of the major parts of tourism obviously is the area of transportation. And when it comes to transportation, what we've seen is that starting in January and up until the data we have right now until March, April's data is still not out yet, we see that air traffic has decreased globally by 53%, which means that out of all the air travel happening in the world right now, it decreased to half. And typically, these months are already a little bit not very high in terms of transportation because it's not yet the vacation seasons. But still, these numbers are a little bit worrisome because it's one of the biggest decreases of air travel ever, if not the biggest one. Okay, we'll have to see how things will actually recover. But one of the first areas in the world that suffered first was obviously the Asian and Pacific area. This is where the outbreak started, and they started their air restrictions much sooner than Europe and the rest of the world did. But one of the things that is interesting is that the Pacific and Asian region during this time of the year is the area that has the most air traffic. So actually, what we've seen is that just because of the Asia Pacific decrease in air traffic, the world average decreased in February by 14%, which is huge, right? A little bit more of data we've seen here. Okay, in terms of passenger revenue, same thing. The picture that we see is exactly the same. Throughout the whole world, the amount of revenue per passenger in the airlines has decreased substantially. This is basically an indicator. Passenger revenue is an indicator that basically tells you for every person getting on the plane, how much revenue are companies able to make. And this incorporates a variety of revenue streams, like extra fees that we all love when we have to travel, upgrades, and so far. So what we've seen is up in January, things were still kind of okay, even though the the virus started in 2019. In January, things were still kind of okay. And if you notice the green bars across the world, there was still growth. Then in February, which is when there was the outbreak in Asia, what you see is pretty much the whole world is still growing somewhat, except Asia, because Asia at this point is when the air travel restrictions start. And so the passenger revenue decreased substantially. And it decreased to negative 40%. okay, which is huge, obviously. But by March, which is the blue column, I think that it's quite self-explanatory that things went really bad. Worldwide, we see a decrease of almost 60%, with Asia and the Middle East being the most affected ones by this. And the reason for the ones who are curious why the Middle East is so affected, because the Middle East has currently some of the biggest hubs when it comes to international flights, and therefore this is the reason that they've been so affected. Obviously, many governments are trying to create incentives or to help the airlines to go over this, but this is not something that will have a quick fix. Not just by injecting money, problems will be solved. All right. Another perspective, not just passenger, in terms of passengers traveling, which is the graph on the right. Okay, we've seen that we decreased in January from around 370 million travelers, which is very similar to last year. But now we are currently at less than 200 million monthly passengers. And indeed, the decrease, as you can see, is huge. On the left, I also give you a graph about decline on air cargo, which is also a big component, and things are really bad. The only air cargo that so far is still, by March, was still in the increasing slightly was in North America, but all over the world, air cargo has been going down substantially. And right now we have negative 792,000 tons less as compared to last year. Okay, so as you can see, the data shows that the picture is quite bad, and which is expected, right? Which is expected, but many people did not expect. Actually, it's not as bad as maybe some of you thought. Just to give you an idea of how does this compare to maybe other crises we had that affected air travel. If we think about SARS back in 2003. And if we think about the financial crisis of 2008, what we see is that indeed they have a slight decrease in terms of air traffic, but did not affect the trend that we see. The trend, like for many years now, is that air transportation is going up and people are traveling more and more. But as currently, in terms of projections, best case scenario, we're going to have negative 850 million people. So we're going to have 850 million people traveling less. Okay, so much less travels. And because of this, obviously, many jobs are at risk, many companies are at risk. And if in 2008, with financial crisis, many airline businesses went bankrupt, we can expect as well that many airline businesses, or even more airline businesses, will go bankrupt from this current crisis. Only the ones that really have the financial system or the asset management to be able to mobilize their assets and their finances will be able to survive. But like I said, best case scenario right now, it's a decrease of 58%. Worst case scenario is a decrease of 78%. As it currently is, we're currently 80%, negative 80%. Currently, but by the end of the year, we expect things to recover a little bit, and that's why you see these numbers between 58 and 78. So as you can see, things are not looking very good. And then when we compare these to countries that are extremely dependent, so I was speaking quite a lot about air transportation, and why is that? Well, because air transportation is one of the major supports industry for tourism. Okay, yes, you have national tourism when for example, you go from your home, the city where you currently are, to another city in the same country, but a lot of countries in this world are completely dependent upon tourism. Okay, on the left, I give you a table provided as well by the World Tourism Organization, and this is the proportional of global tourism inbound and outbound expenditures for the countries with the most reported cases. What does that mean? Well, inbound expenditure is basically money from tourism coming in. Outbound expenditure is money from tourists going out. Okay, now, and what we see is that a lot of the countries on that list are very important to the tourism industry. For example, China, America, the UK, Germany, all these countries are countries that typically, when they travel on vacation, they travel outside of the country. And a lot of that money that goes to other countries is extremely necessary to survive. So on the right, what you have is basically countries where tourism is so important that is around 25% or more off their GDP. In other words, okay, briefly speaking, for every $4 that is generated in each one of these countries, $1 is because of tourism. So what we see is that some countries are at a serious risk, if things don't get better, are at the serious risk of having a national financial crisis as well, which can lead to actually to a political crisis as well, and it can even lead in some cases to potentially countries filing for help from the World Bank in order not to go bankrupt. So indeed, some of these countries are very dependent upon tourism and are dependent upon countries that are richer or more developed to go there and spend the money there. So as you can see, the picture is not very, I'm not coming here today to give you a very favorable picture because it's not the case, all right? But not all is grim. Things will get better, all right? And things will stabilize. But for now, let's go into the second part then, is what can we expect after this situation has been more controlled? What to expect after COVID has stabilized a little bit? Well, to be honest, I cannot tell you anything for sure, and I don't think anyone can at this point. All we have is speculations, and all we have is basically theories of what it can happen. What I want to present to you is some of the things that I believe from my experience, that can happen in the future in different areas. And the first thing is, okay, let's talk at the airport. What can we see in terms of airport changes? Airports are hubs of thousands of people every day, being in contact with each other, being in close proximity to each other. So if there is a pandemic, airports are the worst place in a way to be, because we all been there, we all have traveled in an airport, I think, and we all know, for example, the lines and how many people there is. So what can exactly we expect? Well, first of all, much longer waiting period time at the airport. So the concept of arriving 30 minutes or 45 minutes before the flight would not go anymore. It might be required in the future that you present yourself at the airport 4 or 6 hours before your flight in order to be able to go through all the procedures. And this, therefore, will put even more strain into the potential future demand. In terms of controls, we can also see more temperature checks, okay, maybe through automatic systems, maybe through medical staff at the airports, maybe more than just temperature checks, maybe as well, for example, tests on the spot that might be necessary to be made before you are able to embark. There are some people that think that, for example, if you want to travel in the future or near future by airplane, you need to bring a medical report that will be less than 1 week old or even 3 days old, where it states by your doctor that you are healthy to travel. Okay, so as you can see, for the near future, traveling by plane will be harder. Another thing for sure, this one I'm quite confident, no more self-encounters. Don't get me wrong, I love self-encounters because normally they're quicker, they're much faster to get done with the paperwork, and then you just deposit the bags. And this has been an option that many airlines have been doing to reduce cost and reduce waiting time. But as well, this will be a problem because probably they're going to stop doing it, since these kind of panels, thousands of people touch them every day. So it's a potential hazard when it comes to safety. All bag will probably be bagged from now on. And finally, even the seating arrangements in plane will probably be changed. There's some interesting theories online saying, for example, that maybe they're going to switch the direction. Some people will be facing forward, other people will be facing backwards, which in my opinion, for safety reasons, I don't think that will be the case. But for example, in a free seat plane, you might have the middle seat must be empty, and they might put a protective barrier there. But in terms of prices, another thing that we can expect is actually on the right-hand side, you see some numbers, short-term, long-term. What does that mean? That's the changes in air flight tickets that you can expect. After this situation is over and air travel is again possible again, you can expect a reduction on the airfare prices of around 35%. Okay, in the short run, they're going to do that to try to incentivize people to travel more. After that, on the long run, we can expect prices overall to increase by 27% from what they currently are. And this is based on research that has been conducted after 9/11, after the 2008 recession, because this phenomenon always helps. After restrictions are lifted, people tend to go out more. After restrictions are after things stabilize a little bit more, prices will go up again. In terms of, all right, at hotels, what can we say regarding staying at a hotel? Well, first of all, stricter regulations for sure when it comes to room cleaning. And when I say regulations here, it does not necessarily mean law. Also, many companies, many big groups like Accor, Four Seasons, and so on, they are imposing their own new procedures to clean the rooms. Some of these companies, for example, are establishing partnerships with specialized companies to make the sanitation of the rooms and to really create an environment where the hotel room is decontaminated. Okay, so in other words, a higher standard when it comes to room cleaning, which in my opinion is good. Second of all, we can also see an increase in the cost of hotels. Okay, same thing as before. Hotels will have a capped, will probably have a capped capacity. In other words, many companies will say the governments will impose how many people can be in a hotel based on the number of square meters they have. Other things, okay, many hotels are not going to open before September, for example. Once again, there's going to be an initial travel boom, but then when things are lifted, but many hotels probably will decide to keep themselves closed until the situation stabilizes. And we can expect later on things will come back to normality, but I'll talk about what is the prediction in terms of that in a little bit. In terms of restaurants, what we can expect, well, first of all, limited seating. We all know, I think most of the people here have been to a restaurant in Paris, and we all know how the tables in Paris restaurants are always close to each other, and this will probably stop. Many restaurants, again, there's going to be probably a capacity of number of people per square meter you can have, which means that much more empty tables, which means much less revenue per restaurant. A restaurant only makes money when the tables are full and when the tables switch, and they're not going to be able to stay in business unless they increase the prices, which means they're going to have as well to look for different ways to make money. Also, stricter regulations for sanitation. And what we see as well is that many new restaurants that before were not using services like Uber Eats or Deliveroo, food delivery services, now they're doing that. Restaurants, maybe even gourmet restaurants, they might start doing delivery services in order to compensate the revenue that they're currently not going to be able to have, at least until the end of the year, let's say. And finally, when will things go back to normal? Well, obviously, extremely hard question to mention. But when it comes to tourism, best case scenario, best case scenario, we can expect at least 18 months in order to be able to recover and for things to stabilize. Worst case scenario is not here, but I would say normal case scenario, we can probably more expect 36 months in order for things to stabilize, around 3 years. And this is an opinion that I got from many industry professionals here in Paris, but also from people that I know in other places in the world. No one is expecting this crisis to go well anytime soon. So that's pretty much it from my side, okay? And well, that's to summarize, things are bad right now, but things will definitely get better. And there's going to be quite a few changes when it comes to the way that we consume hospitality and tourism products worldwide, okay? And from my side, that's it. 2 minutes over time, not too bad. And now the chat is open, so if you have any questions, please just let me know and I'll give you my opinion about them. Meantime, I'll just have my coffee. All right. Well, there's seems to be no questions, so let me just say a couple of extra things while maybe some of you think about some questions. There's many things that I did not cover here. For example, right now, one of the major concerns, most people attending today, you guys are students, you're young, okay? One of the things we don't know is hostels. Will hostels be allowed to operate? probably not until next year, since it's impossible to have in hostels you share a room with several people, and this is a contamination hazard, and therefore they might not be allowed to open for longer than hotels. All right. Do you Salome asked me, hello, do you think that COVID-19 will be profitable for ecology? Well, I'm not the best person to answer that, but when it's to tourism, I can definitely tell you that yes. All right. Hotels and tourism tends to consume a lot of resources, and there's many situations where we have tourists increase pollution in locations. You've probably seen the pictures of Venice, that ever since the confinement started, the canal is actually clean because, well, not just because of tourism, but obviously it is the major fact why the canals are clean. Less pollution, all right, less consumption of water, less consumption of electricity. So environmentally speaking, yes, there is a positive impact. The problem is the social and economic impact that comes. Many people lost their jobs. Many people are currently in problems even of starving because of this. According to the UN, we have a huge increase in famines. So indeed, there is massive issues coming from this. But like most situations, not everything is always bad. Marie is asking, Nuno, thanks for conference. When do you think we'll be able to fly again to the US? Look, with the current situation right now, and trying not to speak too much about politics, the US is currently already opening the country to let people get out of confinement, which means there's probably going to be a huge spike in COVID-19 cases. And as we know, the US, for example, they don't have the same system of healthcare system that we have in Europe. So if you travel to the US, might be possible in the future, but it might be strongly not advised by your home country to do so. But in terms of air restrictions, to be honest, I don't think there's good. Air traffic will not come back to normal for at least 6 months, I would say. Any thoughts on the camping that are so popular in France? Yes. Okay. In terms of camping, I think it will be a little bit same situation. Camping, I think, will be allowed to reopen, but under capacity, which means that you will have a limit on the number of people you can have at your camping, which will mean for sure that many reservations that currently are in place will have to be canceled. And obviously that there will be a mandatory distance between, for example, tents or vans that are in this camping in order to decrease the possibility of infection, right? But what we can expect is that this is going to be a very hot topic in the future, because with international travel restricted, people will look more to travel in France, and that means the use of camping, and therefore there's going to be a huge problem, which is very limited supply for a huge demand that there will exist. So yes, there's going to be quite a lot of problems on that, but I think that in a way it's what it has to be done. One question: why are some airlines charging triple the normal price of one air ticket in these awful times? Well, that's management's perspective. I cannot specifically tell you why, but right now airlines are under financial problems and they are under huge costs to be able to travel. There's less people traveling. There's more rules. When you travel, they have more rules to apply. And also what means is that the planes are less full, but the costs are the same. In other words, the revenue went down, but the costs are still the same. And this is a huge problem. So the only way that some of them have to get to that, to be able to make the flight, is to actually triple the prices. And it is awful, don't get me wrong, it is awful. But at the same time, we cannot fully blame them for trying to survive in these businesses. If you're a business and you need to make sure to pay the salaries at the end of the month, then you might have to raise the prices. Governments will probably intervene on this and sponsor air tickets for some situations. But I believe that in the short run, these prices, while the restrictions are still in place, the prices will be naturally high to make people not travel. When do you think we'll be able to fly back to Korea? In August? Possibly, yeah. possibly. Korea did amazingly when it comes to management of the outbreak. Right now, they're having a couple of issues because of a hotspot generated in a nightclub. But I think until August, things will stabilize there, which means that traveling to Korea will be easier. I'm not going to say it goes back to what it was, but probably it will be easier than what it is right now. Marie is asking, do you think that hotels can limit their occupancy rate for safety? I think it's not a thing. I don't think it's a matter if they can. I think it's a matter, Marie, that they will have to. All right, they will have to. Not just because it will be a huge problem. Obviously, they're trying to avoid, because don't forget one thing, insurance policies don't cover pandemics, right? So if they don't cover pandemics, then any cost that you have or any problem that you have due to the pandemic, it would be on the hotel itself. So I think it's just they're going to impose the rules to themselves, but also it's going to be a legal issue. I think that very soon legislation will be passed about how many people can be in restaurants, how many people can be in hotels, for example. And therefore, which means obviously, if you're not allowed to have your hotel full and you still have to pay your salaries, then that means that prices will probably go up, right? Ziad is asking, shouldn't they lower prices as incentives? They will, all right? They will lower prices as incentives, but not while the travel restrictions are still there. Once they lower travel restrictions and more airlines come into the market, prices will go down in order to try to boost the demand. But that only happens once those restrictions that currently are in place, the ones that I mentioned here on this slide, okay, once these restrictions start looking a little bit better, then it will definitely, prices will definitely go up. Like I said, we can expect prices in terms of airlines to go down in the short term. They will probably go down something like 35% compared to what they were before, not compared to what they are right now. Okay, so yeah, it will be an incentive, but not an incentive that will happen while such strict restrictions are in place. I hope I answer your question. Then I'm sorry that I'm saying your names wrong, by the way. What about the impact for PSP students that have to travel for their third year in September? Okay, I'm assuming here you're a PGE student and you have to do your semester abroad. Right now, I'll tell you the same thing that I tell my students on some of these things. Okay, we would love to give you guys some definite answers when it comes to this, but really everything right now is dependent upon what the French government says, but also upon what the government of the place you want to go study to says. I believe that by September, it will be possible to go and do this in some countries, to go study abroad in some countries. I believe that in September, many universities will resume their activities, but not in the same way that we know before. Okay, for example, as you know, PSV is a school with thousands of students, and a lot of times there are days where every single classroom is full, for example. This is something that probably until the end of the year will not be possible. I don't know in terms of schools what the government will say. There's still many tests going on. I cannot speak too much about the how many people will be allowed, for example, in the school, depending on the square meters. I don't know if there's going to be any restriction on this. We're going to have to wait and see. And I know this is a little bit scary. It's scary not to know what will happen. But unfortunately, this is a situation that no one has control over. I think by September, it will be possible to do some things and to go to some countries. But I think the French government is going to have, in the near future, they're going to create a list of countries that will be updated every week or every month, saying countries that they say that it's okay for you to go and countries that is not okay for you to go. Right now, Europe, the European Union is discussing the possibility of opening the borders to countries that have similar risk profiles. In other words, it is possible that in the near future, within 1 or 2 months maybe, they open the country. They will open the country for sure, all right? But it is possible they're going to open to some countries that the risk of the country you want to go to is the same as the risk of France. So that in that case, it's a little bit easier to control, let's say. So that's what we see in the future in terms of traveling. But again, I cannot confirm anything on this, okay? Any other last question? No? All right. There's no last question. It's now 1:30, so I would say thank you very much for attending, and I really enjoyed doing this talk. It's been a while since I did it, so I was a little bit nervous, to be honest. Hope you enjoy, and if you have any questions about this, or if you have any questions about tourism as well, just feel free to contact me. You can find my email on the school's website. And from my side, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much, and I think that's it for today. All right, goodbye, everyone.